Welcome to Sewing Anastasia, and today we are going to make slippers. And you can make these out of any fabric you like. They could be fleece, they could be flannel, but today I'm making satin slippers to match my satin nightgown. And you too can make a super cozy nightgown with beautiful pin tucks on it because it's this month's pattern in the sewing club. So if you join, or if you're already a member, this month you get the nightgown pattern, you get the slipper pattern, and you get a cute little G-string pattern. You get 3 patterns this month. And not only do you get sewing patterns and sewing lessons in the sewing club, you also get access to the sewing Discord. So you can talk about sewing with us all day long. Oh my gosh, so fun. But if you just want the slipper pattern, there's a link down below for that. These slippers have an elastic back, so they stay on your foot nice. We also have cute little flap, which would look great with your initial embroidered here. If I flip that back real quick, we also got some elastic in here to keep this on your foot real nice. You can put an insole into your slipper. And then if we flip them over, we've got that non-slip fabric on the back, making that a great slipper. Even if you're not sewing along with me right now, today, you're gonna learn so many things in this video. We're essentially making shoes. We're gonna be working with the lining, some elastic, and a sole. So make sure you keep on following to check out all those cool sewing tips. So let's do it. Let's make some slippers. The supplies to create the slippers are listed on your pattern. They're also in the description. Now there are a few unique supplies. So you can buy this really cool anti-slip grippy fabric that you can use for the bottom of the slipper so you don't go sliding across the floor Tom Cruise style, right? Don't want to fall. So this stuff's really great and it's listed on the pattern, the one that I'm using here. You're also going to need some 2mm EVA foam. Now you can just buy this at Joann in like the craft section or any craft store or Amazon, etc. This one here is from The Foamery. What a fun company name is that, right? So we're just going to be using this for like the inside of the slipper. But again, you can also buy pre-made insoles. It'll have some more support for you. And fabric-wise, the slipper works with just about any fabric that you want to make a slipper out of. Now it's time to choose your size. To get the perfect fitting slipper, make sure you follow the size chart. And the size chart is for men's sizes 2 through 12, but there's also corresponding women's and UK sizes there, and also foot measurements. So make sure you follow that size chart to get the perfect size slipper. I also want to mention that if you plan on wearing some really heavy, thick wool socks with these slippers, or you're making them out of a really thick fleece, I would suggest going up one size. And if you're looking to get that perfect fit, the best thing to do is sew up one slipper, test it out of some scrap fabric, and then if you need to adjust your size, you can. Now that you have your size, grab your paper scissors and it's time to cut it out. So right here, you're going to choose your size and then you're going to follow that color-coded line all the way around the shape. Once you have your pieces cut out, you should have these 5 pieces here. So we have the upper, which is cut 4. We have the slipper lower, which is cut 2, and then the insole, which is cut 2. This one's optional. You can also buy some pre-made insoles. And then we have these 2 little guides here for elastic. So now let's cut out everything so we can start sewing some slippers. And when you're cutting the foam, you can use scissors, but the rotary cutter is gonna work so nice and just go through this foam so easy. It cuts like butter. And when you do this, make sure you're either laying the foam out on top of itself so you get 2, or make sure you flip the pattern so you get a right and a left sole, because we don't want 2 right feet. And then you'll have a really nice shape for your sole. These are all the supplies you should have cut out for your one slipper. Now you have 2 pieces for the upper. Now I ran out of fabric, so I seamed one together, and I'm gonna keep that one in the lining. Shh, nobody will ever notice. I've got 1 foam insole. I've got the bottom of the shoe with that anti-slip grip on it. And then I've got these 2 pieces of elastic. I've got this bigger one, and then I've got this little 3-inch one here. Right now, I'm gonna sew 1 slipper, and then you're gonna do the exact same thing for the other one. The first thing we're going to do is sew together this back heel. So we're gonna take the upper and we're gonna fold it right sides together for the lining and the shell. And we're just gonna sew 1/4 inch, just right here on the back heel, and then iron it open. We're going to be using a straight stitch, and I have my 1/4 inch foot on just to make this a little easier. If you don't have this foot, it's okay, just sew this up at a 1/4 inch. And we're gonna do the same thing here to both heels for the lining and the upper. Now it's time to iron these seams open. Now I have the seam here ironed open, and now it's time to take them and we're gonna place them right sides together. So we're going to just match up these shapes, and we're going to pin on the inside here. And you're gonna notice we have a little flap here for the slipper. You know what would be so cute? Embroidering on that, by the way, so cute. So we're just going to pin these edges here together, making sure we're lining up the center back seam. Then we're just gonna work our way all the way around the edge here, pinning these layers together. Now you get into the tongue here, this little flap, it could be a little tricky. Just make sure you're lining up your cut points. There we go. Now we have the inside of the shoe here pinned together. We're gonna sew through both layers all the way around, following the shape, and we're gonna use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm going to be starting at that center back heel seam. Again, 1/4 inch seam allowance with a straight stitch. And when we get here to this point, we're just gonna sew down a 1/4 inch, needle in, lift up, pivot, and turn. I need one more stitch here. Make sure you don't catch the underside of the slipper too when you're doing this. When you get back to where you started, overlap your stitches, back stitch, and take out your project. And before we flip it and iron it, we want to clip the points here. So we want to clip right down to that stitch. You want to make sure you stop like right before it though, maybe like a 1/16 of an inch before. This is going to release the tension there so it turns real smooth. If you end up with bunchy bits on the outside, you didn't clip far enough. Now, depending on how thick your fabric is, you can also clip around your curves, or you can cut off a little bit of the seam allowance so that way you don't have as much fabric there in that curve. And this could depend on what kind of fabric you're making the slipper out of. So I'm just going to trim up my corners right there, maybe trim up the top of this just a little bit. Now you could also clip into the curves around the side of the slipper as well to release any tension that might be there. And then after you've done this, we're going to flip it so that way we have the right side face out. We're going to push out this tongue here, and then we're going to give it a good iron. And I really like to do this on the ham. And then we're going to take these edges here and we're just going to roll them in our fingers, and then we're going to give it a nice steam. We're going to work our way all the way around the slipper and make sure you get that nice curve on the tongue at the top. Sometimes I like to use the ham so that way I can wrap the slipper around it and then really pull out that edge. Roll it in between your fingers. That helps the seam pop out to the edge as well. Look at this, it is really starting to look like a slipper. Now what we want to do is add a little understitch on the inside of the lining piece here to help keep the outside rolled to the inside. So I've separated the lining from the self here, and I have my lining piece on this side and I have the seam allowance face towards this side. So we're sewing down the seam allowance to that lining piece 1/8 of an inch away from the seam. I started at center back and I'm going to work my way until I get to that point. I also like to kind of pull the two layers apart here, make sure that seam is nice and flat. And again, I'm just going to this point, so I'm going to come down close to it, add a couple back stitches, and then start on the other side of the slipper. So I'm going to start at the point on this side. Now you could start at this point and then just work your way all the way around. I just wanted to start at center back there for you guys to see that. Add a little back stitch, and we are done understitching. Now we have that understitch in there, really holding that lining down for us. Now we're gonna take this little itty bitty 3-inch piece of elastic and we're gonna stretch it and sew it to that back heel area. And this is gonna help it adhere and stay on our foot when we're walking. So it's gonna go right here in the back, but it's gotta go in between the 2 layers. So we're gonna take it and open it up, and we want to put it on the side that has the seam allowance that we've understitched on, because that is the lining part. So what I like to do is go ahead and pin it right in the middle where the heel seam is. And now when we sew this, we're not just sewing it flat, we're gonna take it and we're gonna stretch it out and zigzag it on, and then it's gonna help bunch it up and back so it's comfy to wear. So I always like to hold it in the middle where I've got that pin. I'm gonna stretch it out over here. And then when I've got it stretched out, I'm also gonna hold it, release, and then put a pin here. So I know exactly where to start stretching from. And then you can do the same thing to the other side as well. We're just gonna take it, we're gonna stretch it out over here, hold it, and then put a pin in there. So you should end up with 3 pins in this. And again, we're putting that elastic on the lining piece of the shoe. So now what we're gonna do is go over to the sewing machine, we're gonna zigzag it on, and we're gonna stretch it and sew it on with the zigzag. So I'm starting at this end here, and I'm going to get a nice little knot in there. And then when the needle's in, I'm gonna stretch it to that middle point, hold it nice and flat, and then we're gonna zigzag right on top of that elastic. I'm at the middle point, I'm gonna hold that, release my pin, and we're gonna sew all the way to the center. Now the needle's in at the center, I'm gonna grab the other end of the elastic, I'm gonna stretch it out, and then I'm gonna hold it so it continues to move backwards. And we're just gonna stitch all the way to the end of the elastic. Add a little back stitch, and we can take it out. Let's take a look at the elastic we just sewed on and then go over how to attach this piece of elastic. So you can see the elastic here is scrunching up that back heel, which is what we want. We want it to create a little tension there for when we're wearing it. So now what we need to do is take these 2 layers and we are just going to sew them together all the way around the outside, 1/8 of an inch. So we just want these 2 layers to stay together. And then once you have these 2 layers nice and stitched together, we're gonna take this piece of elastic and we're going to place it right below where these little slit openings are for the tongue on the shoe. And you can see that shape on the angle fits right in there. And we're just gonna go ahead and just edge stitch that down to 1/8 of an inch away. So again, we're just gonna sew these 2 layers together about 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. And by doing this, it's gonna make it easier to sew to the bottom of the slipper. And now we're all done with that little stitch on the edge. Now I'm gonna sew this side of the elastic down just 1/8 of an inch away from the edge. Just wanna catch it there. You can back stitch, you can not back stitch, doesn't really matter because we're going to be putting a permanent seam there when we sew the bottoms together. And now we're going to do the other side. Just make sure you got it lined up. Now we have one sewing step left, and that is attaching the upper to the lower. So let's pin them together, right sides together. When we're lining these up, we want to match this front notch here at the toe to make sure that everything isn't going to get twisted and it's going to lay nice and flat. So I have that little notch on the tip of the toe lined up, and now I've got right sides together, and we're going to carefully pin all the way around. So now we're all pinned up, and it's time to sew this with a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around. Don't forget to start at the back heel. Make sure you're sewing a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. If you sew it too big, your slipper might end up too small. When you get to that elastic, that black elastic, we're just sewing right over it. Now we're back at the back heel. We're gonna overlap our stitches and back stitch and take it out. Here we go. We're gonna flip the slipper. Just go ahead and push your fingers in there, and there we go. How cute is that? And like I was saying before, I'm just dying to see some of these with like a little initial here. And if you made them out of velvet, how cute would that be? Like a little velvet house slipper. But I am loving the satin here. Now I have both slippers sewn up, and we have one last step, and that is putting in the insoles. And don't forget, you can also buy store-bought insoles that have thicker padding to them. So there's really not much to this. We just slip them in, and then it helps give the slipper a little bit more support and shape. And just make sure you put in mirrored images of them. Make sure you're matching the shape on the bottom of your sole. And there we go. We are finished with our cute satin slippers. I just love that these slippers match the nightgown. So cute. And don't forget, you can get the nightgown pattern over at the Sewing Club. So make sure you check that out, and there's a link down below. And here's our super cute satin slippers on. Gonna keep my toes so cozy. I would love to know, what kind of fabric are you going to make your slippers out of? I know I would love to embroider a little initial on the top of them and make them in velvet. I think that would be so cute. I also think these would be really great out of fleece as well, super cozy. The slippers I sewed up fit great, but I know everybody has a different width of foot. Some of us have wider feet and some of us have narrower feet. So how do we deal with this when making slippers? Let me tell you. So this is just a quick little tip here at the end to help you fit your slippers perfectly. What you're gonna do is get the slipper lower and you're gonna place your foot on it. I want you to place your heel at the size you're supposed to be, and then see where your foot comes out to, wider or narrower here, and then that's the size I want you to cut. So maybe you're cutting a bigger size so you can get that width, that's okay. And then after you sew it up, we can always take down the toe here in the top. We can sew it shorter at the top, but still keep the width of the slipper. Thanks so much for watching Sew Anastasia today. If you have any questions about the process making these slippers, let me know, leave it down below, and I'll get back with you as soon as I can. And I would love to see your slippers, so make sure you email them over or tag me on Instagram. And don't forget, I teach online sewing classes. I teach classes in person here in Chicago in my studio, and there are links down below with more information. And if you want to see what's going on in the studio, make sure you check out my Instagram and follow the stories, because I'm always posting what the students are creating and what my latest project is as well. And if you're really enjoying Sew Anastasia, make sure you like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you know when the new videos come out. And if you're already a subscriber, thank you so much for watching today. These videos are for you guys. And don't forget, you can download the pattern with the link down below in the description. Thanks so much for watching. Bye!